Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth.
Today I'm announcing the unsealing of a 3-count indictment, charging Sean Combs with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, interstate transportation for prostitution. The indictment alleges that between at least 2008 and the present, Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. As alleged in the indictment, to carry out this conduct, Sean Combs led and participated in a racketeering conspiracy that used the business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity, including sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and the obstruction of justice. Let me say a little bit more about the charges. The indictment alleges that Combs abused and exploited women and other people for years, and in a variety of ways. As alleged, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sexual performances with male commercial sex workers, some of whom he transported or caused to be transported over state lines. Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs, and he often electronically recorded them. The freak-offs sometimes lasted days at a time, involved multiple commercial sex workers, and often involved a variety of narcotics, such as ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB, which Combs distributed to the victims to keep them obedient and compliant. As alleged, when Combs didn't get his way, he was violent, and he subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse so that they would participate in the freak-offs, and that Combs hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims, at times by their hair. On one occasion in March of 2016, that conduct was captured on video and later reported in the media. Specifically, Combs kicked, dragged, and threw a vase at a victim in a Los Angeles hotel when the victim was attempting to flee. As alleged, these assaults often resulted in injuries to the victims, which took days or weeks to heal. In addition to the violence, the indictment alleges that Combs threatened and coerced victims to get them to participate in the freak-offs. He used the embarrassing and sensitive recordings he made of the freak-offs as collateral against the victims. And the indictment alleges that he maintained control over the victims in several ways, including by giving them drugs, by giving and threatening to take away financial support or housing, by promising them career opportunities, by monitoring their whereabouts, and even by dictating their physical appearance. Because of all of this, the indictment alleges that the victims did not believe they could refuse Combs without risking their security or facing more abuse. The indictment also alleges other acts of violence undertaken by Combs and others, including violence against witnesses to his abuse, kidnapping, and arson. The indictment alleges that on more than one occasion, Combs carried or brandished firearms to intimidate and threaten victims and witnesses. Now, Combs did not do this all on his own. As I mentioned, Combs has been charged with RICO conspiracy. He used his business and employees of that business and other close associates to get his way. Those individuals allegedly included high-ranking supervisors in the business, personal assistants, security staff, and household staff. The indictment alleges that those individuals facilitated the freak-offs. They booked the hotel rooms and stocked them with the supplies, including drugs, baby oil, personal lubricant, extra linens, and lighting. When the hotel rooms got damaged, they helped clean it up. They arranged for victims and commercial sex workers to travel for the freak-offs, and they delivered large quantities of cash to Combs to pay for the commercial sex workers. The indictment also alleges that they helped Combs cover up his crimes. During the March 2016 incident at the LA hotel that I mentioned earlier, a member of the hotel security staff intervened, and Combs attempted to bribe the staff member with a stack of cash to make sure that what happened was kept quiet. And as the indictment alleges, in late 2023, after public allegations were made about Combs' crimes, he and others pressured witnesses and victims to stay silent, including by making phone calls to witnesses and victims and giving them a false narrative of what they had experienced. And as alleged, Combs used others to help conceal his abuse by monitoring and preventing victims from leaving a location in order to hide their injuries, or by locating and contacting a victim who had attempted to flee. As part of this investigation, in March of this year, special agents from HSI executed search warrants at Combs' residences in Miami and Los Angeles. They also executed a warrant for Combs' electronic devices. During those searches, agents seized evidence of the crimes charged in this indictment. They seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 defaced AR-15s and a large capacity drum magazine. They also seized evidence of the freak-offs, electronic devices that contain images and videos of the freak-offs with multiple victims. And they seized cases and cases of the kinds of personal lubricant and baby oil that Combs' staff allegedly used to stock hotel rooms for the freak-offs, more than 1,000 bottles altogether.
Well, Puff Daddy's back in the news again, and as we've become accustomed to, is not for anything good. The feds have arrested him for racketeering and human trafficking. Frankly, they tipped their hand on this one last year, and it was obvious it was just a matter of time until the other shoe dropped. They were telegraphing this move for the longest while, I guess preparing the minds of the public for this big move. Well, they finally closed escrow and decided to arrest and charge him. I'm not a music lover, definitely not a fan of Puff Daddy, and even if I did listen to his music, I still wouldn't care. But I do think that it's worth commenting on because it shows how foolish the black celebrity class is. These guys never learn. The charges against him are racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. And that means that this is being pursued as a RICO case. That's basically what this is. Well, first you had those rappers out in Atlanta, and now this. I guess the feds figure if it was good enough for young slime life, it's good enough for Puff Daddy. Nothing happens in a vacuum under white supremacy, so they're using the same strategy across the board. This is clearly the go-to template for how prosecutors at the state and federal level are going to go after these rappers for these show trials. And whether you like Puff Daddy or not, just keep in mind, there's nothing they're accusing him of that you haven't had a lot of these white businessmen who have been doing a hell of a lot more of. We'll get to that in a minute. But we all know it's the sex trafficking part that's the salient reason for why the feds have been licking their chops on this one. Isn't it interesting how every time it comes to some high-profile black man who's being charged with something, the accusation is almost always something of a sexual nature? If you want to bring a black man down, just accuse him of not being able to keep his pants up. When it comes time for them to fire what they think to be their big gun, their silver bullet, it's almost always something having to do with sex. That tells us a lot more about the white authorities and what they fixate on than it does the black male celebrities who they're constantly trying to lock up. And they made sure to have a black U.S. attorney be the one presenting this to the public. You can bet Merrick Garland personally signed off on that particular move. Now, I listened to this U.S. attorney lay out these case, as it were, and with the exception of the allegations of narcotics and violence, nothing they listed were really crimes. They said that Puff Daddy set up sex parties and videoed them. Well, those aren't crimes. They say that his assistants set up lights and such for their sex parties. Again, those aren't crimes either. Buying condoms, baby oil, and the like, those aren't crimes, nor are the AR-15s. If they're so worried about AR-15s, they need to go out to the suburbs and stop America's next mass killer before he strikes. So they describe Diddy and his assistants setting up sex parties, stocking up on baby oil, personal lubricant, extra linen, and lightings, as if those were crimes when they're not. Now, if the accusation was that they supplied drugs, if that's true, then that could be a crime, as might the paying sex workers, because prostitution is illegal in most of the United States. This is a sex trafficking racketeering case. Now, the accusations of violence, if proven, could count as crimes, but that's not what they're hanging their case on. This is not an assault case. It's human trafficking and racketeering. Now, the judge ordered for Puff Daddy to be held without bail. His lawyers say they're going to appeal that decision. And I find the judge's decision that Diddy be held without bail to be strangely typical. R. Kelly had blown through his little old money, so he didn't necessarily have the cash to fight against that kind of decision to have him held, but Diddy still has his millions. So this is about making sure that he spends some time behind bars, no matter how this all shakes out. They're basically recycling all the same plays that we've seen the last few years when it comes to going after black male celebrities, recycling the same talking points that they use with Bill Cosby and R. Kelly, the same kind of prosecutorial framework that they use to go after young slime life. Hey, many of these guys wound up being convicted, especially Bill Cosby and R. Kelly, though it took them 2 bites at the apple to get Cosby. In that case, did get thrown out, but nobody cares about that part. The talking point is that Diddy is a man worth potentially billions of dollars, and this powerful billionaire used his power and influence to be able to abuse women in particular and do it with impunity, and he just flaunted it in front of the world. Now, they could be right, but again, the way they're going after this, it seems like something else is clearly at work here. What this episode says about black celebrities is what's interesting to me. Seems these guys just never learn. Sure, the white powers that be might give you a little old contract, put you on some magazine covers, couple of cover stories for this or that Entertainment Tonight episode. They'll invite you to their little parties up in the Hollywood Hills. They'll do some drugs with you, which is where a lot of these black celebrities picked up the habit at. They saw their white counterparts introduce them to the business with drugs, so they figured, hey, I can do the same thing too. Because these white guys over here are allowed to get away with it, I'm allowed to get away with it too because I got a little bit of money and a little bit of fame now. And sure, they'll pass around some of their little skank meth head harlots for you, but that doesn't mean you're on the team. All it means is they think that they can make use of you. And if there's one thing that the white media has a PhD in, it's using people. They know that no matter how much money they give you, each of these celebrities will still have weak minds and they'll never understand the danger that they're actually in. They'll just tell themselves that they made it, that they're smarter than everyone else, and that they got it all under control. Meanwhile, they're taking absolutely no action to protect themselves from their new friends. Puff Daddy happens to be the poster boy for this, and speaking of poster boy, he was also the man out front for the download Democratic support game of Vote or Die. You remember that one? Well, as the meme goes, so you've chosen death. Okay, so he told people to vote. And it was pretty obvious who he wanted people to vote for. A lot of young people, particularly young black people, took their cues from old P. Diddy. They voted all right, voted for the Democrats. And this is how the Democrats repaid Diddy. Now, whether he deserves it or not is a side issue. The point happens to be he fashioned a rod for his own back. Puff Daddy also was the guy behind Revolt TV, and we see what that turned out to be. Sure, there may have been 1 or 2 purely accidental instances where they did something reasonable or respectable in spite of themselves, but for the most part, Revolt TV has been a sewer. Now, when it comes to these black celebrities, they don't understand the game at all because they don't want to understand the game. They're trying to escape blackness, and that never works. When white power gets ready to come after these guys, we find that they always come out of left field with some kind of old video or audio or some old allegations, usually from a woman from way back when. For Puff Daddy, they had some video from 2016, 8 years ago, of him allegedly mistreating some woman in a hotel hallway. That's what the white media does. They get the goods on you early, and then, instead of just unleashing it, they hold on to it, waiting for just the right moment to go ahead and drop it when it's going to actually be able to hurt you. And that's how they always operate. Keep it in their back pocket, because they know sooner or later they are going to be able to use it. It's like I've always said, white society absolutely loves a cruel joke, especially one that takes a long time to pay off. They love that. They love to savor it, to let the mark show up every day, make nice with them, smile in their face, all the while knowing that they're going to destroy this person. One of the things they love is that when the mark finally figures out they've been had, to see the look on their face, the shock, the disbelief, the humiliation. White power loves humiliation rituals. They absolutely worship them. And when you see some black celebrity's mugshot, that's the apotheosis of humiliation. Even if the target does defeat the government, even if they prove the charges to be completely false, there's still no getting around the fact that that mugshot's going to be out there regardless forever. Now again, I put Puff Daddy in the same category as R. Kelly. I have no sympathy for him. I'm not here to support him. But what I am saying is, when you got the white authorities here, especially the federal government, trying to make it sound like he's the next Al Capone or the next Al-Qaeda, they're just doing a little bit too much. That's what I'm trying to say. And speaking of saying things, I want to know, when is Vince McMahon, the billionaire wrestling mogul, going to be looked at by the authorities? There's been accusations against him for decades now, and nothing's ever been done about these allegations that he's been mistreating people, the sexual misconduct and such. Nothing's been brought up on that front. He's been made the subject of a civil suit accusing him of sex trafficking. If the issue here is a billionaire using his position to abuse women, then I think since the sex scandal rumors against McMahon go back decades farther than anything against Diddy, McMahon should also be the subject of a federal grand jury, I would think. If the point of all this is that you have a powerful man abusing his position, and that all it takes is an accusation to justify arresting him and holding him without bond, fine, but then it needs to be an outrage no matter who is being accused, and they also all need to be locked up without bail. Because if this is really about going after powerful rich men abusing their position, then there's nothing you can allege about Diddy that you can't say several times over about these white media executives, except that they have a far closer relationship with the government officials than Diddy ever had. They make the campaign contributions, and in many cases, their spouses and family members and close friends work for that government. Nothing like having people on the inside. But again, ultimately, I don't feel sorry for Diddy. I don't think you should either. For the same reason I didn't feel sorry for Cosby, though I do acknowledge that he was railroaded and done wrong by the system, and his rights were flagrantly violated. But the government using its position to bring illegal, unconstitutional charges against a black celebrity and lock him up for no reason, that's as old as Jack Johnson. Since when did these black celebrities forget what world they live in? One of the accusations that gets leveled against people like myself happens to be, well, you just didn't like Bill Cosby's pound cake speech. That accusation is both right and wrong. My problem with Cosby's pound cake speech was that he failed to understand that the biggest threat to him wasn't some black child raised without parental guidance. Cosby lives in a mansion and has money and security and all the rest of it. Sanctimony aside, some teen punk raised on gutter gangster rap and reruns of hood rat reality TV shows were the least of Bill Cosby's worries. It was the government who was gunning for him. And he failed to see that, and as far as I'm concerned, there was no excuse for that failure. These black celebrities never learn, no matter how many of their fellow Negro entertainers get taken down and sent up the river, no matter how many times it happens to them personally. Diddy's been involved in legal troubles before. Only this time, there's no Johnny Cochran to fight for him. These Negroes never seem to understand that they have to put a thumb on the scales. Diddy's music is all about his houses, yachts, cars, clothes, and hoes. He should have been spending his money on getting some politicians in his pocket. Considering his high profile, state-level judges are good and a must, but what he really should have been looking for was a way to make sure he could keep the feds off of him. See, when white men get some money and come into our circles, they want to make sure that they're angling to put themselves in a position where they'll be either able to call some shots or at the very least to make it where they can't be removed. They start looking around to see how they can checkmate us. They look and identify any possible way that they could get jammed up or taken down, and they start making moves to compromise whatever those threats or levers may be. Black celebrities, on the other hand, they consider themselves to be nothing more than entertainers at least, and businessmen, quote-unquote, at most. Well, as we see with Puff Daddy's case and so many others, there's something else these black celebrities also need to consider themselves to be. Targets. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Mouse, Mo Love, Frederica Moore, Urugu, and Asfayo Dingaswayo. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.